Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to corrupt cops reacting to life sentences. Now, this is going to be, for me, it's going to be, I don't know if entertaining is the right word, but it's going to be fascinating because for me personally, I believe that police officers should probably be held to like a higher standard when it comes to being a law-abiding citizen, because you know these are the people that are entrusted to uphold the law, to protect the people, and a huge amount of trust and faith is placed into officers. And I think the vast majority of officers are great officers that do their job with pride, and they stick to the rules and all of that sort of stuff. But there probably there is a small number of, I guess, corrupt cops that just kind of like damages the reputation of police officers, of the good ones. So to see them be held to account and sentenced for their crimes, I think it goes some way in restoring, I guess, the honor of the profession. But it's going to be interesting to see what these guys do, what they did to get these heavy sentences. Life, you don't get that just for stealing a packet of crisps, do you? Yeah, this is going to be very interesting. And guys, by the way, if you enjoy my videos and especially the movie reactions, please check out my Patreon for a lot of exclusive content and the full movie reactions, because obviously I can't put those on YouTube. So yeah, definitely check out the Patreon, and yeah, let's get on with the video.
Robbery, drug dealing, and a web of lies to cover it all up.
The corruption on Baltimore Police's elite gun unit was breathtaking.
13 officers brought down.
One of the biggest corruption scandals.
A judge sentenced Sergeant Wayne Jenkins to 25 years.
The leader of the disgraced unit begged a judge for mercy.
Yeah, Sergeant Wayne Jenkins.
Sergeant Wayne Jenkins.
Sergeant Wayne Jenkins.
Former Sergeant Wayne Jenkins.
Just who is Wayne Jenkins?
Yeah, who is Wayne?
This case is a wild one. So wild that HBO Studios decided to make a 6-part series about it.
Wow.
An organized crime ring right inside the Baltimore Police Department. This case is ridden deep in corruption, with a total of 8 members involved, so our focus will be on the ringleader, Sergeant Wayne Jenkins. Jenkins was the leader of the Gun Trace Task Force, or GTTF, which was responsible for a number of underhanded crimes.
Jenkins admits to stealing prescription drugs that were originally looted from pharmacies during the riots.
I deserve 10 to 15 years, Jessica. I sold drugs as a dirty cop.
Wayne Jenkins ran his elite unit as a criminal gang.
Robbery, drugs, evidence planting, just to name a few. Not exactly what the mayor had in mind when creating this group.
At least 10 armed robberies, burglaries, 1 million.
Why? 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 Because I think cops in America make a good salary. I think cops can quite easily get to like, 90K, 100K sometimes. So they're making decent money. It's like, is it just greed? Greed, I guess, and just for maybe the thrill of it. The rush, I guess.
Dollars in drug sales, the systematic looting of overtime in a city that can barely afford it.
Sergeant Jenkins not only stole drugs, money, and overtime, he also stole a father and a husband from a family.
And it dated from recent cases like this one caught on body camera to 2011, when Jenkins's crew tried to rob 2 men in a car, causing them to flee, hitting and killing Albert Davis.
His actions will leave a lifelong imprint on these poor people.
7 years later, we find out that corrupt cops who swore to protect and serve were nothing more than criminals.
Crazy.
One of the victim's daughters was asked if she could ever trust the police department after what transpired.
I mean, come on.
Her answer was quick and completely understandable.
Do you trust the police department after what your family has been?
What kind of question is that? Like, I mean, obviously she's going to say no. I mean, he must just be doing it for the, just for the effect, I guess. Like, how could you trust them? How could you? You lost your family member.
Been through?
No, sir. No, never.
We're not sure we would either. But the question still remains. How did years of organized crime in a police force finally get taken down? Inadvertently, one man was responsible.
A judge sentenced heroin dealer Antoine Washington for his role in a deadly drug ring. He sold the heroin that killed a teenager from Bel Air.
The files say that while wiretaps were being recorded, the voices of these 8 badge policemen turned mobsters were heard frequently throughout.
Police were investigating a string of suburban overdoses. They set up a wiretap. They soon found out that Baltimore City police officers were part of the drug trade.
Now that's not normal.
This reminds me of The Wire. I don't know why. Like, maybe it's because it's set in Baltimore and it's got, you know, police involved. It just reminds me of like the conversations between McNulty and Stringer Bell. Man, that show is classic.
Investigation into that overdose led the feds directly to the Gun Trace Task Force, a corrupt unit of Baltimore City cops.
Upon further inspection, the FBI found that nothing relating to this group of officers was in fact normal.
Disgraced Detective Mamadou Gondo had been protecting the drug crew, enabling their business to flourish into a multi-million-dollar operation.
On top of the recordings, they also discovered a number of official complaints and irregularities against these officers.
Further details illuminating the depth of corruption by Jenkins and company that today's plea proves. Goes back at least as far as 2010.
Sadly for Jenkins and his team, the FBI now had themselves an abundance of evidence that would ultimately lead to arrests.
What was he thinking and the other members of the crew? Did they think that they could just keep doing this in perpetuity? They could just carry on being corrupt and just get away with it? That they must have realized that, you know, their days were numbered. Like, it's such a dumb decision to do this. Like, why?
That was my choice, Jessica. Go to trial and get life. Life in prison with 3 small children.
Jenkins was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, where he was heard to have wept during his sentencing, begging the judge for mercy.
Has now pleaded guilty for his role in the robbery, extortion, and fraud ring while leading the elite Baltimore Police Department gun unit.
9 counts total in 2 different indictments: racketeering, robbery, altering records, and depriving the freedom and liberty of 2 men by planting evidence in a case that sent them to prison.
His family had little to say regarding his sentencing. His lawyer, however...
Man, if I was related to him, I'd just be so ashamed, man. I'd be so ashamed. No wonder they didn't have anything to say, you know. He's brought disgrace to the family.
Did have a few words on his behalf.
Mr. Jenkins is extremely remorseful. He's been remorseful for a long time, even before these charges were brought.
And Jenkins himself does seem to show signs of remorse.
When asked by Judge Blake if the former sergeant had anything else to say before accepting his guilty plea, he said, quote, "No, ma'am, I am ashamed of myself."
Should Jenkins really be forgiven?
No.
We're not so sure. It's easy to show remorse when you've been caught.
Absolutely, man. You nailed it on the head. You know, while he was making those millions of dollars, do you think he was regretting it? Do you think so? I don't think so. I doubt it.
Something tells us that he wouldn't have stopped so quickly had the FBI not been hot on his tail.
London police officer has been sentenced to life in prison for the kidnap, rape and murder of a young woman.
She was caring.
Oh,
she was...
Is this the case of Sarah Everard? Yeah, and Wayne Cousins. This piece of excrement.
Funny. She was clever.
On the evening of March the 3rd, 2021, PC Wayne Cousins was waiting.
It's clear, isn't it, that the only reason he was here was to abduct a woman.
Wayne Cousins pretended to arrest Sarah Everard and used his police handcuffs to kidnap her.
In her last hours, she was faced with brutality and terror, alone with someone intent on doing her harm.
A police officer and now a self-confessed sex killer.
This case is the definition of cruelty. A true example of abuse of power and a case which happened just 19 months ago. This was a crime which was weeks in the making. On the evening of March 3rd, 2021, 33-year-old Sarah Everard was walking home from her friend's house just outside of Brixton Hill. While walking down the A25, she was then stopped by a man who this case is focused on.
Man, this story was huge when it happened. huge. It still is today. It's still quite often talked about. Just to use your badge to commit such a horrific act. And it wasn't just one act, it was multiple things. Just a true psycho, this guy. True psycho.
Police Constable Wayne Cousins. The details that are about to follow regarding the next 96 hours in this case will chill you to your core.
Witnesses saw this, the moment of the calculated kidnap. They believed Wayne Cousins was an officer doing his job. Cousins then drove to a remote rural area where he raped and murdered Sarah Everard. He's later seen on CCTV, calmly continuing with daily life.
In the rural area of Ashford, it is believed that Cousins raped and then strangled Sarah just 100 yards from his woodland cottage using his police-issued belt, literally taking the law into his own hands. Cousins just left the body there in the woods whilst he drove to Kent where he disposed of her phone. On March 5th, he then filled a petrol tank with fuel and burned her body inside of a refrigerator. On March 7th, he bought 2 contractor builder bags which he used to conceal the burned body before disposing of her remains into a nearby pond. If your stomach isn't sick enough yet, this twisted individual had more secrets to share. Details that shed a light on Cousins, his manipulative nature, and his pure desperation as he's locked in handcuffs.
I just don't know how we can prevent this from happening again. I just don't know how we can do it, you know, unless you subject officers, I guess, to yearly sort of like psychological evaluations, which I'm sure there would be a lot of pushback, and I understand why there would be pushback, because it's going to, you know, it's going to be quite disruptive. It's going to be quite, you know, it goes into your personal life a lot. But, you know, this is just such an awful thing that happened. You know, if I got stopped by a police officer, you know, I would trust them. You know, I would maybe, you know, maybe I've done something wrong that I didn't know. You know, I would trust them. That would be my default. But after this sort of thing happens, it's like, man, like, can you? Really?
Here is the body cam recording of Cousins being questioned by police in his own residence.
Do you know Sarah?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you know where Sarah is?
No. Sat in handcuffs and well, I know her. So you must have something to say that I know her.
Have you ever personally met her?
No, not personally, man. I don't know if my family's going to be alright still. But they threatened to take my family away from me.
Look at him, he's trying to get sympathy. Mate, shut, you monster. Like, how dare you? Like, just shut up and confess.
You can hear Cousins claim that a local gang had approached him, threatened him, and requested that a girl be delivered to an unknown location in exchange for his family's safety.
Oh, you lying
Yet we know
scum.
this not to be true. And so did the police.
Officers found Sarah's body 50 miles away, in remote woodland in Kent. It was hidden in a builder's bag. Analysis of his mobile phone showed he'd been in the woods where Sarah was found.
These horrific details posed the question, was this really the one and only time Cousins had committed an act this dark? Well, these despicable acts were fresh in the judge's mind at sentencing when he had this to say.
You have irretrievably damaged the lives of Sarah Everard's family and friends. You have very considerably added to the sense of insecurity that many have living in our cities, perhaps particularly women, when travelling by themselves, and especially at night.
Even his old boss could not disguise her disdain at his actions and the tarnishing of the Metropolitan Police Force.
Massively tarnished.
I absolutely know that there are those who feel their trust in us is shaken. I recognise that for some people, a precious bond of trust has been damaged.
Because, I mean, before he did this, he must have displayed certain behaviours to, you know, other officers that work with him. Surely, you don't just go from being a normal guy in every way to doing this, do you? Like, I'm sure he must have been saying a lot of super sketchy stuff, you know, really sketchy stuff, especially maybe when they're out on like patrol and stuff. He must have been saying all kinds of weird stuff.
I am so sorry.
But the real pain can be heard in the words of Sarah's family, the people who will be scarred by this heinous act for the rest of their lives.
Wayne Couzens held a position of trust as a police officer, and we are outraged and sickened that he abused this trust in order to lure Sarah to her death. The world is a safer place with him imprisoned.
This case had some backlash that was felt nationwide in the UK. It turns out Couzens had received an indecent exposure complaint earlier that week, and that the MET police force may have been able to prevent Sarah's death.
Sarah's death sparked nationwide protests and vigils. For his crimes, Wayne Couzens has been told he'll never be released from prison.
Absolutely. Let him roll.
Thankfully, Couzens won't ever be able to repeat these acts, as he has no possibility of parole, with a whole life sentence.
Bye.
Other news, a Miami-Dade police officer is facing some serious charges today after his arrest.
Miami-Dade police lieutenant under arrest tonight. The allegations very disturbing.
This next case again pushes the boundaries of some of the horrific things that are being done behind the badge.
The Miami-Dade police lieutenant under arrest for molesting a child.
Guys, really disturbing details surrounding this case.
He's accused of molesting a girl.
Molestation. This is a hard story to highlight, but when it's a person that's...
Honestly, stuff like this genuinely makes me sick. Like, physically. Like, I get, like, a physical reaction to it. Like, who the hell could do that? Who could do that to a child?
Society sees as a protector that's ultimately the predator. We need to shed light on the atrocities and betrayal. In 2018, 47-year-old Braulio Gonzalez was arrested on multiple counts of molestation on a then 8-year-old child.
This is a mugshot of Miami-Dade Police Lieutenant Braulio Gonzalez, a veteran member of the Miami-Dade Police Department SWAT team.
The crime started in 2011 and continued for 2 whole years until 2013 when the girl turned 10.
The lieutenant abused a female, according to documents, over a period of 2 years, and at one time held a gun at her head.
There is very little information about the victim because of her age, so we will refer to her as Jane Smith. Jane told police that she was scared for her life, and this was the reason she didn't come forward sooner.
Well, this lieutenant was booked a little after 5 o'clock this afternoon. According to documents, this abuse happened several years ago. Here's the story.
He would then, over the next couple of years, touch her body in every inappropriate way that you can think of. Truly sickening. So how was this child molester finally apprehended? What brought forward into the light his awful crimes that he'd hidden for years?
This little girl told a psychiatrist on September 5th about the alleged abuse that took place between 2011 and 2013.
And Jane would tell her therapist about the situation, which ultimately started the investigation that put this monster away. And in May of 2022, that's exactly what happened.
So tonight, life in prison. That is the sentence handed down to a former Miami-Dade police officer convicted of molesting several girls. 2 of the victims spoke about what happened to them.
So it was more than just one. I thought it was just one. Ugh.
Gonzalez was arrested in 2018 after a victim told a psychologist he fondled her several times when she was between 8 and 10 years old.
So at this time, based on the jury's findings, on every count, I'm sentencing you to life in prison. Count 1 will be a 10-year minimum mandatory. Counts 2 through 9 will have a 25-year minimum mandatory. Everything will run concurrent.
Gonzalez is now serving his time behind bars, so the children of the Miami-Dade area no longer need to check under their beds at night, with one less monster free to roam the streets.
For me, like, anything to do with kids, like, it's just a hard, like, I've got no mercy at all, nothing. I don't, like, it's just, how could you, man? Like, how could you?
George Floyd, an African-American man who died in police custody.
The incident was caught on camera, and we must warn you the images are disturbing.
Oh, he's not moving.
Overnight, nationwide unrest.
Curfew goes into effect at 11 p.m. Eastern Time.
You can see police here now firing tear gas into the crowd.
Large groups torch police cruisers.
But we do want justice, and we want equality.
No, did they kill him, bro?
This was a heinous act. An act that exposed a badge-bearing criminal who not only committed a murder in broad daylight, but an act of heartlessness so dark that it shocked the people of Milwaukee and around the globe.
Yeah, man, I remember this was talked about for months. Like, it was everywhere. Everywhere. I can't believe it was, so long ago.
This is the murder of George Floyd. On May 25, 2020, former officer Derek Chauvin was the third to arrive to a call that accused George Floyd of using a counterfeit $20 bill. George resisted being thrown into the cop car due to a claim that he was claustrophobic. Chauvin then removed him from the other side of the vehicle, and this is where it becomes hard to watch.
What do you want?
I can breathe. Please, the name of it.
Chauvin held this position for over 8 minutes before the paramedics arrived.
Evil.
We can even see an off-duty paramedic telling Chauvin to remove his knee and get off his neck.
Check. The man ain't moved yet, bro. Get off of his neck.
George Floyd was pronounced dead at the hands of law enforcement. 9:25 p.m. May 25th, 2020. The moment the world changed. The moment tragedy resulted in the globe standing united against racism and inequality. Many protests occupied the streets of America, Canada, and across the globe as a result of George Floyd's death.
Demonstrations across the country grow.
Something has to be done.
People were outraged, social movements were created, and Chauvin was made to take responsibility for his actions, where other guilty officers had not before him. After weeks of testimonies in a long and vigorous trial, the verdict was in.
Sentence for count one. The court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. Based on your...
270 months, so 24 months is 2 years. So what's 2 years and 4 months? What?
Abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George.
Oh, no, sorry. That's 20 years. 20 years. I don't know how I miscalculated that. It's like 24 years or something.
You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition for the remainder of your life.
You'll see little to no emotion is shown by Chauvin throughout his sentencing. Much like during the 8 minutes he had his knee on the neck of George Floyd, cutting off oxygen to his lungs.
Evil psychopath.
Derek Chauvin, George Floyd. Two names that will be written into history for eternity. Chauvin for his deadly abuse of power, Floyd for his tragic, untimely death. A death that highlighted the need to do better as a society and the need to hold everyone accountable for their actions, especially those who have power and influence, those that swore an oath to serve and protect.
Absolutely.
The movement won't rest until we get justice.
Say his name! George Floyd! Say his name!
Heavy stuff. Mate, after this, I need to watch something light and funny because that was some really, really heavy stuff there, honestly. Really, quite, honestly, quite depressing at times. Just, the fact that, it's people that, are trusted to uphold the law that can break it in such horrific ways, especially to be honest, all of them were awful, but Wayne Couzens and Derek Chauvin, why? How could you do that? How could you? And to be honest, the first guy as well, who was, the leader of that squad, but also the second guy, the one in Miami, I don't even want to say what he did. You know what he did. It's just sick. It's sick. And I hope that, we here in the UK and you guys in the States, we can root out, these officers who have no place in their police forces, who have, they do not possess the character and the morals and all that stuff to carry the badge, because even one rotten apple can spoil the bunch. It's just, these guys have got to be rooted out and discarded. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.